I'm Welton Gaddy. Welcome to State of Belief, continuing coverage of the 2020 Republican National Convention. Back with me once again is political management expert Greg Lebel, and we're at the end of day 2 of this convention. Greg, you ready?
Oh, I'm ready.
Well, last night as we signed off, I promised that I would be positive as we begin tonight, and I'm going to be positive. I'm going to do that with a learning experience, and the learning experience requires a question for you, Greg. What do all Americans need to know about the Hatch Act?
Okay, I preface this with an important statement. I am not a lawyer. That said, there are two aspects here, and let me say as we begin, I think this is much more significant as it relates to Mike Pompeo's speech tonight than it does to where the president is giving his acceptance speech, because as we know, the president and the vice president are exempt from the Hatch Act. There are other issues there, but the bottom line is they are exempt from it. So that the Hatch Act was it's a little over 80 years old, and it was passed by Congress in response to some abuses of political power within the bureaucracy, and essentially it was developed to protect federal employees from being forced into taking political positions or doing partisan activities because their jobs depended upon it. So it really was intended to put serious restrictions on bosses in the bureaucracy to stop them from doing things that that could make that would abuse their power in the context of their employees' daily work and impositions of political propriety, whether that's giving money or participating in other ways in politics. I think so. That's sort of the core of it. And I think with regard to what we're looking at with Mike Pompeo, I think the more interesting thing is actually to look at the memos that the State Department has sent out. And I actually found them, and I want to just if I can just read a couple of sentences from it, because I think this really sort of makes it clear. And this is from a memorandum from the State Department Office of the Legal Advisor, and that memo. So this was issued in 2019. He said this advisor states that political appointees are in the State Department are prohibited from engaging in political activity in concert with a partisan candidate, political party, or partisan political group. Senate confirmed presidential appointees, and that is to include the Secretary, the Secretary of State, may not even attend a political party convention or convention-related event, even on personal time and outside of the federal workplace. That's pretty clear. And based on my non-lawyerly read of that, Mike Pompeo is way outside of his own directive tonight. And there's already been a move in Congress to look into that, to explore whether, in fact, he did violate the Hatch Act. Now, of course, the administration has a history of ignoring abuses of the Hatch Act. Ivanka Trump ran afoul of the Hatch Act at one point, and Kellyanne Conway on more than one occasion. And the administration just chose to ignore those problems. So we don't know where this will go, but I think it makes it pretty clear that Pompeo was not acting within his own department's interpretation of what the Hatch Act means.
And go just a little further and talk about why it is so important that that office not get tied up in politics.
Well, it's probably more important in the State Department than in some of the domestic departments, for the very reason that we are dealing with realities in other countries. And again, dramatized tonight by the fact that the Secretary of State was sitting on the roof of the King David Hotel in Jerusalem, where he is there on official business. And the whole idea of this strong endorsement, this position can't help, I think, but infect the nature of conversations between the Secretary of State as a representative of this country and this administration, and not only the Israelis, but other players in the Middle East as well. So it really there's a good reason for this for these restrictions to be in place, especially when we get into international affairs, it seems to me.
And, I would just have to say to the president, any president about this, just because it's legal doesn't mean it's smart.
Well, how many ways can we talk about that distinction through the last couple of days? Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to guess at that. I think the First Lady's remarks were all her own this time around, so that's progress. What did you think of what you heard from her?
I heard before the speech that she had not run this by the West Wing, this speech by the West Wing, and I thought, yeah, right. Clearly, she did not run this by the West Wing or the campaign. This was a really quite remarkable speech because it broke with so much of what we've heard and seen prior to the speech in the last 2 days. And really, I think in the administration in the last 3.5 years, she is the first person in these 2 nights to actually acknowledge that people have died in this country, and you mentioned this last night, I think, but she was the first one to acknowledge that over 177,000 people have died in this country. She was the first person to acknowledge, even talk about racial unrest as racial unrest and not as murder and mayhem in the streets. I mean, she said, I'm struggling with, I don't remember exact words, but I'm trying to figure out what all this means. She acknowledged the pain that people are feeling from the state of the economy. This was really off message. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to think, what I was watching had a split screen, and they showed the president watching her, and I was really trying to read his face. She really went off on her own tonight, and she even ended the speech talking about what she wants to do as First Lady in the next 4 years. Not this is what my husband is going to do for the country, but she talked about in specific about these are the kinds of things that I want to do as First Lady. So it was a real break with everything that we've seen so far, and probably with everything we'll see from here on out. I would imagine, and I imagine there will be an interesting conversation up in the upper floors of the White House tonight.
Well, if so, it probably is not the only one they've had. So
probably not. Probably not. So therefore, it was. I have to say, it's the best speech that we've seen so far.
Yeah. Well, though not on the projected program, and just the opposite of what you've just been talking about, Pam Bondi attacked Joe Biden and his family with no documentation. She sliced the Bidens like a drunk butcher. You know what? I'm mentioning that because what was going through my mind was, okay, here is what's coming. This is the stuff I was expecting. And I think what she did tonight, we're going to hear her words with other people's mouths over and over again in the weeks ahead.
I think that's right. And I think we heard some of that echoed certainly in Eric Trump's speech, which followed. But yeah, and it stood out as a speech. And the thing that struck me about it is there was a certain, I will call it a certain basic dishonesty, because I can't think of another way to put it. She kept talking about a close member of a relative of Biden, but never identified who that was. And that's inappropriate for that kind of allegation. I think that was an inappropriate way to deal with that. So it was a harsh speech. And it was, I think, essentially an unfair speech in that if you're going to make these allegations, they have to be specific and they have to be clear. And yeah, this is, I think, where we're going to go. And this points to, I think, what the difference between what the strategies of the two campaigns is, because basically the Biden campaign has to make the case, make this about a referendum on President Trump. Mm-hmm. Trump is trying to make this a choice between Biden and Trump. So she presented the choice. Here's what's wrong with this guy. Here's why you can't choose him. So there's a struggle going on now, which we will go through in the coming weeks. And one of those two models will win out. It's either going to be a referendum on Trump, in which case Biden stands in good stead to win, or it's going to be at this comparison of the two, and then it just gets kind of muddied, I think. But yeah, I think that's what we're watching play out here. You're right.
I think I counted 4 Trumps in all tonight, but I can't be sure of that. But like last night, the whole production has a distinctly tabloid feel to it, don't you think?
That's a good word for it. Yeah, and I think part of it has to do with the who these speakers are. It's sort of like, with all due respect to these folks, and they're some are they're doing some important work and so on and so forth. But it's sort of the C list. It feels like a lot of times. And that's fine, but I think they're going after, again, I think another point tonight, they were going after African-American men tonight. Clearly that was part of it. And again, who are you going to find in the Republican Party to go after African-American men? And so you've got the Attorney General of the state of Kentucky, who was well-spoken, but really kind of blew me. Poor Abraham Lincoln tonight. There are so many references from the vice president, from the Attorney General of Kentucky and others, sort of hearkening back to Abraham Lincoln as their model. And I'm thinking, how can you do that? Poor Abraham Lincoln is all I can say. So yeah, there is that certain feel about it, and the nature of the accusations, the attack on, again, the inaccurate attack to a large extent on Hunter Biden, and the continuing lack of veracity in a lot of what they're saying. There's a lot of lies being told here, to put it bluntly.
Yeah. You know, I'm going to go back to COVID for a minute because it's far too important to just skip over. People who don't drink should be safe in playing a drinking game called take a shot when someone says COVID. The issue is just not there. No. Other than the self-congratulations that we heard on the first night of the convention. I don't think if you were telling your candidate what to do and you'd been through all of this stuff, surely you would be saying you've got to deal with that or you're going to miss the whole thing.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that the fact that Larry Kudlow, until we got to Melania, Larry Kudlow mentioned COVID, but it was in the past tense. It's like, This is all over. We've finished with that. And that in some ways that may have been worse, because it's just there's a clanging when you sort of hear that. But you're right. I mean, not talking about this, not talking about where we are as a nation in the context of this pandemic, makes everything that's going on illegitimate. There's no logic to any of this in ignoring COVID and the related state of the economy. But as far as they're concerned, it's just not there. It's fascinating.
I want to make sure to mention the Alternative Convention on Founding Principles continues at www.cfp2020.us tomorrow, with Lincoln Project co-founders and former cabinet members scheduled to speak. Are you getting any feedback from that?
I am not at this point. I checked it out today, but I'm not hearing a lot about it, and so that makes me. I'm hopeful that's getting a lot of attention, but I'm not really hearing a lot about it, which is sort of unfortunate. But hopefully that will change because they've got some important people, and there's some great names associated with that. So it's definitely something worth looking at.
Do you have anything else in your mind about tonight that I haven't asked about or that we haven't talked about?
I have something in mind, but it actually harkens back to last night when we were talking about, if you don't mind, we were talking about what that message was last night. And I think it relates to sort of where we've talked a little bit about where we took it tonight, but we were sort of struggling last night trying to figure out sort of, who the audience was and what the message was. And I think we came up with this theory that we agreed that part of this might be that they're worried about their base. And that it's not as secure as it could be. And I stumbled today on a quote on an article in Roll Call, which is a respected newspaper here in Washington. And I just wanted to quote from it because I think I always love it when I find some reason to say, I think we were right. And I think we were right. This is just very briefly in Roll Call, they said today, it's hard to identify any state or district where Donald Trump is performing at least as well as he did 4 years ago, let alone better. This points to what we were talking about. And we saw more of it tonight. They apparently, and this I think confirms it, if this is accurate, they apparently are very concerned about holding on to their base. Or chunks of their base. And that's what we talked about. Again, we went after women tonight. We went after African-American men. There's some real concern within that campaign, which I think helps inform how we continue to watch this, because they're not reaching out. There's no attempt to reach out. They're trying to build within that small section. So I just wanted to point that out because I think we hit on something last night, and this sort of backed it up.
Well, let me tell you that I have 2 or 3 different things on my mind tonight, and this is one of them. But I am at home in Monroe, Louisiana, and around here, we're just waiting for 2 separate hurricanes to come right through where we live with a gust of wind. And that's going to make some of the decisions for us on how much coverage that we'll be able to do for the next couple of days. But I think we will be able to do it. We're hoping to be able to do it. And do tune in again, because we're going to be here one way or another. Greg Lebel is Professor Emeritus of Political Management at George Washington University and a veteran of several presidential campaigns. Thanks for this evening, as always, and I hope to see you tomorrow night. All of you, look for more of our convention coverage with activists and analysts all week at stateofbelief.com. I'm Welton Gaddy. Thank you for listening and watching.